Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Cars.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Welcome to MotorWeek's 13th podcast, and we hope this is a lucky 13th for you. We know it is for us. Thank you for joining us once again. And around our table today, three of our staff from MotorWeek, starting off with road test producer Brian Robinson.
That's me. What's up?
We'll find out in a second. Writer Shamit Choksi.
How are you, John?
And Over the Edge reporter Stephen Chupnick.
Hello, hello.
And let's get right to it. Brian,
Yes,
when we were down in Roebling at Savannah, Georgia, our racetrack where we do our winter testing, we had a large group of vehicles, but two of the cars down there were the newest versions of sports cars that we've been testing and loving for years. One was the Mazda RX-8, a new R3 version, and the Porsche 911S was the other one. So why don't you get us kicked off by giving us your impressions of the two cars?
Yeah, the RX-8 is kind of the stepchild in the import scene. It kind of never gets the respect it deserves. It's a fun little car. For 09, it gets updated. I think it's the first time it's been updated since it came out 5 or 6 years ago. New R3 package, basically a performance package. Tighten up the suspension, different wheels and tires, bigger spoiler, that kind of thing.
But no new motor, nothing else for the
correct.
motor.
The motor, typical rotary engine on the track, very unique feel to the car. No other car is like it. You just rev the heck out of it. It's all about getting through the corner because you're not going to get much power coming off of it, so you get through as fast as you can. And the thing really handles well. Big improvement. It stays nice and flat. You can. It doesn't feel like you're going around the track that fast because it's smooth. And you carry a lot of corner speed, but your times are right there with most other cars.
They made it look a bit more aggressive, which I like. But a lot of people who haven't looked at the RX-8 probably don't realize it is a true four-door sports car.
Yeah, you can definitely put two adults in the back.
And you've got basically the suicide type doors in the rear.
Right.
I mean, it's a little tight back there. I'm not sure I could ride back there very long.
Oh, I've been back there. It's not too bad.
But it is a pretty unique product when you look at its price range and what it does, and a remarkably well-balanced car.
Yeah, it's not. I would say it's quite as good on the track as like a 370Z, but as far as an everyday car, it's a fun car.
So it's a way of having your performance and not letting it beat you to death every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as the RX-8 driving, we had about 8 cars down there, and I'd say that was probably the most fun, just overall to drive, just to drive around in the some of the streets around
on
Savannah.
the city streets.
On the city streets.
How come?
It was just you sat there and the seats were comfortable. The clutch was easy to use. It was and
everything was right there.
Everything was right
it.
there.
It's ergonomically, it's a very nice piece of work.
Yeah, it felt tight. It felt good, just good to just sit there with the wheel and the drive and just not have to worry about anything else with the car. Everything was kind of compact.
It is interesting. It's a sports car that we tend to forget once in a while because they haven't done that much to it over the years, but it still is a very impressive performer. Speaking of which, the latest 911 and the S trim impressions, big improvement, small, what, evolutionary?
I wouldn't say evolutionary. Like all 911s, new 911s is more of an update than an all-new car. The biggest updates were obviously in the powertrain. I think the S got 30 more horsepower than previously. And obviously with the car we had, the big addition is the PDK transmission, which is a huge step up from their Tiptronic automatic that they had before. This is a dual clutch manual, sequentially shifted, without getting too complex. Basically all the odd gears are on one side, even gears are on the other side of the transmission, and there's a clutch pack in between. So when you're, like, say, in second gear, hard on the throttle, you hit the button, boom, you're instantly in third. It's already got the next gear selected for you.
It just opens one clutch and closes another.
Yeah, shifts are instantaneous.
And a big improvement over the sequential manual shifter, the single clutch transmissions that we've had to endure for the last dozen years or so.
Yeah, it's definitely the best out there right now, and it's good in automatic mode for everyday driving as well. You don't have to pay a penalty at all.
It looks like that dual clutch technology is going to pretty much take over the manual automatic business in the next few years.
Yeah, and just have one transmission basically. The only thing I would say I didn't like about it was the shifters are kind of more buttons on the wheel than actual paddles like a lot of them have. It just took a little bit to get used to.
What about the car? We've taken more Porsche 911s to our racetrack at Roebling Roads than any other car over the 25 years or so we've been going there. Anything different about the car that you noticed?
I think it has, to me anyway, it had a little more of an edge. I think the last mile or two had kind of lost its edge. I mean, it was more of a handful on the track. I mean,
so you really had to work a little harder to drive it.
Yeah, you could definitely feel that extra 30 horsepower. I mean, it wanted to really come off corners.
Was it overwhelming? I mean,
no, not overwhelming, but just more so than the last generation.
They had gotten docile. Mm-hmm. I mean, they'd gotten to the point where you didn't have to be very good to drive them fast, which is good in one aspect, but on the other aspect, it's kind of disappointing on the track because you didn't feel it was testing you enough.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it had gotten boring, but more understeer than oversteer. And this one, I think kind of brings a little more of that oversteer aspect.
More classic Porsche, what we think of its handling.
Let me ask you this, though. I like sometimes comparing apples to oranges, and we just talked about the Mazda, two totally different cars, but both of them on the track. Which one did you enjoy more? Which one did it for you more?
On the track, I definitely 911. No doubt.
This for the engine, if for nothing else.
Right.
But they're really the Mazda is. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. An everyday sports car.
Sure. Well, I would say the 911 is too if you got the money. I mean,
it's a lot more money.
It's definitely a daily driver, though. I mean, we've had plenty of 911s in here that we
driven constantly, day in, day out.
Yeah, we've worn the tires out on a couple.
So, do you think? Here's another question: do you think something like a 911 is worth more than twice the price of, say, a RX-8 or a 370Z?
I wouldn't say it's worth. You can have certainly as much fun in the RX-8 and the 370Z. So I wouldn't say it's twice the car as those, but it's certainly.
But then, of course, the others aren't a Porsche either.
Right. Which
makes to Porsche files makes all the difference.
That's right.
Thanks, Brian. Shamit.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We're going to a little bit different vehicle. We always are railing against badge engineering, but here's an unusual piece of badge engineering. On one hand, you've got Chrysler, who invented the front-wheel drive minivan back in the early 80s, and then you've got Volkswagen, who actually invented the small people mover back in 1950 with their original rear-wheel drive microbus. Now they've joined forces producing a van just for the American market, a minivan called the Volkswagen Routan.
Yeah.
So, is it more than badge engineering?
I mean, it's. I think you've said this before. It's more of a kind of a clash of cultures. It's two different eras coming together.
But did they work?
But that's the question. I mean, this minivan is built on the Chrysler platform, and yes, it worked. It absolutely did work. Basically, it's a Dodge Grand Caravan with a Euro flare. That's what we're looking at.
What did they do to it?
Sounds fantastic.
It does, doesn't it? Sounds wonderful. I think there's more than just a rebadge going on. There are some distinct differences. I mean, it is, in one way, it's the same car. It's assembled on the same line, right? They're side by side. They're coming off the same line. But this thing, there are compromises to be made. The Routan has certain things that the Caravan doesn't bring. Those being things like Euro styling. It has a distinct look.
Inside and out.
Inside and out. Inside, it's richer looking. Driving-wise, it has a Euro suspension, so a Euro-tuned suspension, so it's a better drive. It feels like a better drive. But I guess the bird in the hand that Chrysler has is stow and go and swivel and go.
Their innovative seating.
That's huge. I think that stuff's worth its weight in gold, and Chrysler did not give that up to Volkswagen, and I think smartly they did not, because they want to hold on to that uniquely.
So it looks like Routan, which has the same powertrains and a little bit different appearance and a better ride, all of which I agree, and a much nicer interior than the Grand Caravan in Town and Country. It looks like that's really a competitor for other import vans.
Correct.
Like from Toyota and Honda, which also don't have stow and go. But then that leaves the Chrysler vans pretty much by themselves as still having the most innovative seating.
That's right. That's right. I mean, so they stay innovative, and they're using this basic blueprint to come up with a very good minivan, but it's not exactly the same as the American minivan.
It's if you're a German car fan, you would probably like this the new Routan better than you would say its counterparts from Chrysler.
I think we'll see people leaning towards that. For that
yeah, I like to push minivans because when you compare them to crossover utilities, they're much better on fuel. Brian, you had something to say.
Most practical vehicle out there, minivans. I tell people that all the time. Most people don't want to hear it. They want an SUV, but definitely the most practical vehicles out there. And they renamed the My Gig entertainment system Joybox, which I like that name much better.
Yeah, I like that too. It's kind of cool.
Any other comments on Routan?
Aside from that, it has a lot of the same stuff: dual sliding doors, dual rear DVD.
It's a minivan.
It's a minivan, and you won't be disappointed if you have a family.
Except that you have to find some place to store the rear seats.
Correct.
Yeah, which is kind of a bother. I think we still have a couple of sets around here that never made them back into test vehicles. Stephen Chupnick, you went to a very unusual car show. The proper name of it was
the Professional Car Society International Meet.
And that really means what kind of vehicles? Vehicles to die for?
You can say that. It's a group of people who have who meet monthly or quarterly across the country that have old-time and new hearses, ambulances, and limousines.
And I know that I know a lot about this because a friend of mine has been running this national. This is their national once-a-year get-together that you covered. All right, so tell us about it. What was your experience? What did you expect before you went in, and what did you find?
Well, I have to say, it was my 30th birthday weekend. So that was definitely the way that I wanted to spend my birthday up in New Jersey. But this guy Greg Marksmer, was nice enough to have us in up there, and we saw some of the most interesting vehicles I think I've ever seen in my life. Is old time 50s ambulances. Actually, for the first time ever, there was a car called the Ambulette, which is a Studebaker, and it's a kind of a dual car that they basically transformed from a Studebaker into an ambulance, and it's for the first time there were actually two of them.
Well, all of these cars were basically, brought into specialty manufacturers and transformed. But this was something that was done after the fact. It wasn't originally
It wasn't originally an ambulance or a medical car, and they converted it into a medical car. But these were particular because they could take it back and have it just put back in and made it into a regular station wagon.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Were the cars mostly original? In other words, looking like they were when they did service, or were they highly customized, or what?
I'd say almost every single one of them was original parts from the 1950s and 60s.
They were stored into like pristine condition?
They were in mint condition. It was like they were supposed to be on the roads in the 1950s.
Greg's a longtime friend of mine and a member of the International Motoring Press Association. I know he's been involved with these specialty cars for a very long time, and his enthusiasm for them when he talks about them is just amazing. When you got there, what were the people like? Because you could see, they weren't all like Herman Munster walking around, right?
No, none of them really were. They're just regular. They just look like regular people. Not to sound. They're just normal people.
They're collectors. They just collect something different. There's no extra hands coming out or two heads.
No.
But did they have more? Was there passion? Were they passionate for these cars?
These guys were more passionate about their cars than probably we are about new cars.
We have to change that. No.
They know about every single ambulance that was ever made. They know about every hearse that was made. I guess it was considered a hearse. They call it a horse-drawn coach, but it was from the Civil War era.
It didn't have a V8.
It didn't have it. No, there was no engine, and this couple from Pennsylvania,
2 horsepower, right?
2 horsepower, yeah. They were very knowledgeable, not only on theirs but on every other.
It
era.
wasn't just internal combustion engine vehicles. They also had some very historic wagons.
Oh, very much so.
It sounded like a fun one, and I must say I was
definitely
very sorry that I couldn't go along on that one as a grip.
Yeah.
So you enjoyed yourself.
Very much.
It's going to make a great segment.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and thanks everybody for joining us for our MotorWeek podcast number 13. I'd also like to thank, of course, as always, our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, who makes sure that we come through loud and clear, our podcast creator, Bob Mixter, who came up with this brilliant idea, and also our producer, Michelle Parker, who makes sure that all the content we get to you is up to date. Besides bringing us goodies this week, it was low-fat peppermint patty, York peppermint patties. So, and I think we pretty much demolished that bag. Thanks for joining us for our MotorWeek podcast, and we hope to see you again soon on MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Cars.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.